Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for open and liberal minds. Because yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, as you know, every single week we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle the big conversations. Well, this week around the world, it will surprise you that there is another pandemic that people are not discussing. Is a disease of humanity. Is the mass gathering of paedophile rings. And when I say this week, unfortunately it's every week. A recent article in the BBC spoke about the de facto capital that the Philippines is now becoming as an area where we're seeing a large rise in internet child porn. Families are pushing their kids as young as 6, sometimes siblings, to perform sexual acts on each other in front of paying consumers in the Western European world as well as that of North America. Now, this is really interesting for the fact that the internet providers have not done enough to stop this, but that is a conversation for another day. What I wanted to do is take you on a journey inside the mind of somebody who's actively making a difference. He's really challenging the status quo. And in a country where over 50,000 global Indians call home, which is the Philippines, this is a guy who's a shining light and example of what it means to truly belong to a nation. On today's show, I'm joined by Father Shay Cullen. He's lived in the islands for over 53 years. He's done some extraordinary work and he set up an organization called PREDA. The aim of PREDA is to support the youth and the most vulnerable of the islands to be able to come in and rehabilitate themselves from sexual trauma. It is a remarkable conversation and one that will melt your heart, because the issues that are taking place in the Philippines are the same issues that are taking place globally. And in order to make a difference to the world in which we live, to make sure that we take on that stance as human custodians for a better planet for all, well, these are the issues that we can start to stamp out immediately. But it takes collective action. I'd like to thank Father Shay for coming on at the very last moment. He responded to my messages in a really nice way, and we built up a very good friendship ever since. I really hope that this inspires our community to start coming together in a powerful way to reshift the world for all. But before then, a quick note from our dear sponsors. If you want to find out more about the Global Indian series, by the way, well, it couldn't be easier. Simply come to the website, which is www.globalindianseries.com. There you can listen to this podcast and the entire repertoire of discussions so far.
Hi, this is Damesh Shingala, co-founder of Novus. At Novus, we believe technology leads the way for a meaningful change. We are on a mission to change the way corporations, governments, and institutions interact with information. Same as the Global Indian podcast, help people transform for a better future. Find out more on how we are inspiring global change, either at the Global Indian Series website or Novus website, to learn more about our innovative software solutions. From our family to yours, I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
My name is Chitra Stern, and I am a proud Global Indian Ambassador and CEO of Martinal Resorts and Martinal Residences. We pride ourselves on the journeys that define a community, and our developments bring people together. Did you know that over 70,000 people just like us call Portugal home? The Global Indian journey has brought people together in a meaningful way, and on behalf of all of us at Martinal, we want to thank you for joining us in these remarkable conversations. We look forward to seeing you here in Lisbon post-COVID.
Hi, my name is Divya and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Okay, very good, Jan. Glad to be here.
Shay, run me through, because you've had this extraordinary experience in the Philippines that has gone over the course of 53 years or so. And you've seen just exactly what has changed and reshifted there. I suppose the question is, What is the biggest misconception do you feel people have about the Philippines?
Well, I think they believe, of course, that it is a central hub of child sexual abuse. That is one of the very big misconceptions that they have. There's a lot more good things here besides the crimes, and many of these crimes against children in the Philippines, which we are combating, and that's the nature of my work at PREDA Foundation. It's driven by the demand of the pedophiles all over the Western Europe and America and Australia. And people have a misconception that, this is the only place where it happens. But actually, the child sexual abuse happens in every country, everywhere, by everyone. And 1 in every 3 children are a victim of sexual abuse at least once in their life.
Shocking statistics. It's when you started this off because of something that you had witnessed in the Philippines. You told me on the phone before that you're walking through the streets there, and you were based in the Philippine Islands as part of the religious work that you're doing, and people are offering you their kids, their children, because I thought maybe you were part of the U.S. military there. Could you run me through just the early starting points of what you started to see emerge through the islands and where you think some of the problems lay?
Well, and the story, as it begins way back in 1969, when I was very young, and I was assigned by the Columban Missionary Society in Ireland to come to the Philippines and, do traditional parish work. But I saw in the city the home of the U.S. Navy, the U.S. military Navy base at Subic Bay. And Olongapo City was just outside the gates, and it was one big brothel of more than 100 sex bars and clubs, and many young women and children being sexually exploited in this industry and no other employment. So I took a great concern that this is a terrible exploitation of the human person, destruction of the dignity of every one of those young people. And so I began to think of, how can you change such a terrible situation? How can it be change the world? I know it was a huge question to ask in those days. I would walk on the streets and I'd be shocked because the pimps and the traffickers would come to me and, "Hi, Joe, you want a girl? I have little girls." And they'd show me standing in a doorway, 12-year-old little girls. I'd be quite shocked. I remember one case, and I said to the guy, "Hey, I'm calling the police. This is a crime." And the guy said, "Hey, I am the police." And he laughed and disappeared. So, corruption and syndicated sexual abuse of the children was very prevalent in those days. So I really began to think of how this could be changed.
How did it take the shift? Because I know we spoke about the US military base that was there. Was it really because of the international impact upon the Philippines that people actually brought in the need or the necessity for this industry to occur?
Well, the U.S. Navy, of course, have reputations in the past all over Vietnam. The Vietnam War was raging in those days, as you know, and they had bases in Thailand and all over Asia. And of course, in the Philippines was the biggest recreation city of Olongapo in those days. So they really did in cahoots and working with local politicians. They allowed this industry to grow and expand. So you might say it was really a planned recreational area, but with sexual exploitation, drugs, alcohol, broken homes, human trafficking, child sexual abuse were all the evils and crimes that were on the streets of Olongapo in those days. And so the day came when I discovered a group of 18 children who happened to be victims of the sexual exploitation, and they got venereal disease and brought to a charity, a church clinic, where I was like a chaplain. And I was so shocked to realize 9 years old was the youngest child. And Jennifer was her name. Actually, she's an older woman now, and she still comes to the PREDA Foundation every month for help, and whatever help we can give. It's unbelievable, but that's the way it was. And I began to say to those around us, this has to change. We have to get rid of the military bases. They're the roots of this evil, and they have, corrupted communities and the mentality of the people who have come to believe that this kind of sexual exploitation is kind of okay. I mean, if the authorities and the higher ups, as they say, allow it and promote it for money, it must be okay. We can do it also. That's why I think the pedophilia have grown and was allowed to grow in the Philippines.
Fast forward on to today, I know with the BBC article that was shared, you have families that are allowing and actually pushing their kids to do sexual exploitation live on camera. And you have groups of people from Europe, right the way across the world, that are paying for this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How bad is this?
Well, it's growing. It seems that we don't know how bad it is because local police are not very, shall I say, astute. They've only a very small unit assigned to investigate these terrible crimes. And most of the tip-offs that we hear about and come from the Interpol and from the police agencies in the US and in Europe and Australia. And they are very active and they're dedicated and committed to trying to save the children and catch the pedophiles. Their money of the demand and supply really is the problem. The demands coming from the developed nations who want this sort of terrible abuse against children to be done live on the internet. So we are trying to go after that also, the root causes. Like I went after the US military bases, and we had a 10-year campaign to close the military bases, and we succeeded. It seemed impossible, but if you keep trying, campaigning 10 years, we converted the military bases into an economic zone, which was a kind of a success, you might say. And it did close down the whole industry of the city, and jobs at the zone with dignity became a reality. And a lot of investments came in from commercial corporations and business. So it's changed the whole city, from one brothel city now to an economically driven city. However, the crime continued in the mind and hearts of many people that you can make money out of sexual exploitation of children. So now in the Philippines, there's 16 million people in dire poverty, and this is the absolute poverty. And that's a lot. The population of the Philippines is 110 million people. And, it's all on the internet. The Office of the Statistics will tell you there's the 16 million people in utter poverty. And these are the people who see an opportunity that their children can be a source of money by showing them on a camera, a video camera on the internet to pedophiles who send money to them through courier services like GCash, iWallet, Western Union. And that's how they make the money.
But it's also the parents that are facilitating this. And in most cases, from what I was reading, is the parents that are pushing their kids to go in front of the camera.
Yes, that's the tragedy of this. Aunties, uncles, even mothers, they say, oh, well, there's no physical, really. In many cases, they claim there's no real physical abuse of the child. It's just showing the child naked and in front of the camera while the pedophiles are ordering the things to be done to the children. But they do these sort of acts of rape and to the children online. And why it's allowed online is the big root of the cause. And we have campaigned, of course, against the telecommunications. And we have law passed in the Philippines demanding that they install blocking software, and video blocking software that can detect these terrible images. But and in the UK and Europe, everywhere, the telecommunications and internet is all one, and none of them is working and taking action. And that's what I said on the BBC video report. The UN the international law has to control the internet so that all the good stuff can be passed through the internet, but they have to stop this sex abuse of children.
Wasn't there a law that was passed in the Philippines, though, to change this, but there was loopholes, gaping loopholes that was left there?
Yes, I worked on that law in 2009 with a very good lady senator, Jambi Madrigal, and we passed this law demanding that the ISPs install this software. But the Telecommunications Commission, I think there's former employees of the telecommunication companies are on that commission. They've sort of captured, as we call it, they've captured the government so that they only have to pay a fine. And now a new law has been updated, has been upgraded, and is only coming in this month into action in the Philippines, where we hope these loopholes are now being closed. So we'll be watching very carefully to see that telecommunications, that they really do something to install software.
I know the thing that will be on many people's minds, especially mine, is that the whole structure, this is economically driven. It is supply and demand, as you said before. The ugly face of economics is destroying ultimately families and future generations. With your center that you have obviously a lot of children that have suffered through trauma. What are some of the issues that they're continuously facing with? You mentioned obviously the young lady who was 9 years old, who's still now coming back to the center on a month-by-month basis. What does it take to help them heal almost?
Well, at PREDA, we do have, as the BBC did show, images, and on the PREDA website and on YouTube, we have lots of videos that your listeners could look up. PREDA Foundation YouTube, and we have videos showing the therapy that we do. We have a whole program in the community. The children, we have 70 children now living in the girls' home, and they have a daily life, which is really value formation, it's acceptance, it's understanding, it's encouraging them to accept their dignity and to be empowered and to fight back. And above all, which everyone needs, is to release that inner anger, that pain, that hatred. And we have a cry therapy or emotional release therapy in a padded soundproof room, and they scream and they shout and they really punch the cushions as if they're attacking their rapist and their trafficker. That's the therapy, and this empowers them. And then we follow that up with education, of course, and we try then to file court cases with them against their abusers. So these abusers do not abuse more children, and we win convictions. This I just reported this last 2-3 weeks, we have 4 convictions. 3 of them, one is a trafficker, and the other 3 are rapists of children, and they all got life imprisonment, but which is 30 years. But one of them got 12 years. But that's our work, is really bringing justice and closure, and that's how these children heal. And then they do succeed. There's no question. We're happy. That's what keeps me going. Actually, is when you see these kids coming back and healing and come out fighting. They come out fighting, and they're only very young, from 6 years old to 16. So it really gives me hope, and I'm sure your listeners will realize that it's not hopeless. We do win convictions, and the children do heal. But only how many? 120 every year is all we can help.
And that's 120 out of what is a endemic situation that's happening, because this is a global issue. You've seen some of the worstest parts of humanity, unfortunately, over the course of time of the work that you've been doing there. What shocked you the most?
I think what shocked me the most is and still is the sort of sense of corruption that, young girls are there for depraved men to sexually abuse. And they have this sort of all over the world in many communities, sort of fake marriages, they call it, but it's pedophilia. And this is what shocks me, is the extent of child sexual abuse. And that the fact very few our people are doing very much about it. In other words, that there's a sort of a sense of, you might say, entitlement by certain males, that they have a right to exploit children for their sexual gratification, and they justify it. It's okay. And there's, we might say, fake laws which allow so-called child marriage, but it's all fake, and it's just a cover for pedophilia. I mean, a 12-year-old child living with a 25 to 30-year-old man, I mean, it's not marriage. That child has to be in school and have right to an independent life. So and we have children coming with us right now, 3 children. The youngest is 13, pregnant, and we have to take care of her at 13 years old. So this goes on around the world, and it's something that the human, the question here is, we are the human species, us, with the brains, intelligence. We're the only species on the planet that sexually abuse our own offspring. And that's something, in the whole animal kingdom, they don't do this, but it's only us with the brains, so-called, that actually sexually abuse our own offspring. It's just
it's ridiculous, isn't it? We've taken the very best of what makes us human, and we utilized it for that. And you think, what is that what we've done as custodians on the planet, out of one of a trillion species that go and inhabit this incredible earth? That's what we choose to do. Like when you look at that human experience, and you've had all these experiences behind that, what does it mean to be human to you?
Oh, well, for me, human is relating to people with problems. Humanity is reaching out to others who need help and serving them and helping them. I mean, what better way can you live than being the Good Samaritan, as we know, to help the wounded? And as we heard in that story, the politician and the rich guy, and the so-called religious leader walks past the victim that's dying on the road. And it's the poor Samaritan, who's a non-person, you might say, in that society. That non-person is the one who had all the humanity and had the love, and they have the care to serve and help the wounded and bring them to the hospice for care, and even had aftercare in the story. So that's what we're doing. And, it's what everybody should be working to promote these values and to promote the human dignity.
But and that leads me to the next question. It's Philippines is a renowned Catholic country where people read certain scriptures, they go to mass, they go through all those rituals in order to say, I am becoming a better person. Yet you have this happening under people's noses. How is religion perceived then for most people in your experience?
Well, there's two levels we have to look at in religion. You have to have those people of personal convictions, right? And then you have those who are sort of unthinking members of an institutional religion. And the members of the institutional religion are not really thinking about the application in action of the values of Christianity, which I said really basic in the story of the Good Samaritan. love your neighbor as yourself. No, what simpler message can one have? But sad to say, in the institutional church, they are very much into the rituals and the rites, and that sort of you can go to heaven, paradise if you follow all the rituals, which is really a contradiction of what basic Christianity is in itself. Christianity is, as you know, we just said, it's service. It's ready to help the poor and the oppressed and to lift them up and work for justice and make this a world full of dignity and human rights. And so that's basically Christianity. But children, of course, in Christianity, as we know in Matthew 18, this Jesus of Nazareth, he says the most important are the children. So we are very conscious that the institutional church has really failed, to really come out and as an institution to take a very strong stand on these issues of children's rights. But mind you, there are, of course, individual bishops and priests but not that many, who are actively really trying to work for these values. So there's what they call in the Philippines, split Christianity, 2 levels. Those who are committed to the human rights aspect of Christianity and children and women's rights, but then the institutional religious and clergy are living a completely different life. They're like on another planet.
So it's almost the economics of that, isn't there? Because I think a lot of people utilize it for personal validation rather than saying what their custodian duty is to those people around them. When you look at the Philippines right now and you hear about obviously these child pedophile rings, we know that the problem isn't coming from just the Philippines, because that's trying to service the needs of these families. But the real issues are coming from the internet providers who aren't doing enough, but they are making financial gain, coming from the politicians who aren't putting the right policies in place, even though they know so, but because they feel there'll be economic disadvantage. But it's also the consumers, people who are actively pursuing this. Now, what goes through somebody's mind from your perspective for them to go down that route to say, let me spend this money and see abuse happening online? And what more can the British or our global public do to stop this and challenge it?
Well, that's a big question, of course, and very difficult to know what goes on in the mind of depraved people who are offering to pay money to, to see this child sexual abuse live, or even passing it through their websites, and the child abuse images. Of course, this is also part, not only live streaming, which we call online sexual abuse, but now you have the institutional website presence of abuse. Now, what the mind of the depraved, I don't understand. They do say in the psychologists that many of these have been abused in their childhood and so on, and the child sexual abuse. And of course, in my belief that there are those who, majority, 90%, I think, have to cope with the abuse. They don't report it, they don't get help, but they live in their life and to survive. They are survivors and they become good people as best they can. But there is a 10% who maybe turn to abuse others, take revenge by abusing other people. And I think a lot of I believe anyway, a lot of the violence and hatred and anger of these murders and killings and group shootings is all in revenge and vengeance. And I think sexual abuse has a lot in childhood, has a lot to answer for, making adults angry and full of violence. But as you're getting back to the beginning of your question, is the internet server providers at the root cause, and big millions and millions and billions of dollars earnings by the telecommunications corporations, and the international law is actually supporting them, because it's I think it's the 360 provision in the US law that says that the internet server providers are not responsible for what passes through their servers. And I think that's a very serious mistake. But I see in the EU, And at the moment in the UK is working on a new law, and there is something they have sadly eliminated from that law quite recently. But they do need to have very, very strong control over the telecommunications corporations to make sure that they do really install the latest softwares that can really detect and stop this abuse. That's really the best answer for that.
What's your biggest fear, Shay? Because again, you've almost seen some of the biggest fears played out in front of your eyes over the course of 53 years. On the same time, you've also seen some incredible changes in what the human spirit is and some of the progressive parts of what makes us human. But if we go back on the fear side, what are your biggest fears?
Well, I don't have much fears. I have more hope, you might say, that there are many good people out there listening to you now and watching this podcast, good people of good heart. And the hope is, I don't fear for the future as much as I hope that the good people can respond, that once they know the truth will set us free from fear and from ignorance. And that is why it's so important your podcast reaches as many people as possible. So they just need a spark to awaken their compassion. And so my hope is for the compassion of the human person to come alive and to turn people on, to be on fire for justice, to be on fire for the rights of children and the oppressed and the exploited people in the world. I think there is a big movement, as we can see, for example, to save the planet, and all the young people are out there. You know, it's wonderful to see the campaigning and the struggles and the different rallies that people are taking to be heard. So this gives me a lot of hope. Any fear I have, of course, is the authorities becoming very authoritarian and cracking down on dissent and protest. Of course, we journalists here in the Philippines are under very, very strict control. So we cannot really speak out, I must say, without a death squad coming to our door. And, you know, Philippines is the worst place for us journalists. Hundreds have been killed in the last decade. And recently, 2 more murdered on the streets because of their work. Trying to tell the truth. So we have a problem here. And my fear, of course, is that the door for all the truth coming out in media will be closed. So we hope that the good people outside of the Philippines will speak up and will take up the cause of human rights and justice.
And I think further on to that point, the fact that you have people from across the world now, we're such a multicultural society. If we are to claim custodianship of a nationality, therefore we have to do what is right by every sentient being in those countries, if not across the globe. So if you're sitting in Manila and you see this happening on the other side of the islands, you cannot close your eyes to that and have selective moral outrage. It's the fact that we are our brother's keeper. And if our brother looks different to us, sounds different, even has a different faith, the fact is, we are the same. Humanity is one. And this is a time that we're all standing together. If people would like to find out more about your work, Shay, where can they go to?
Well, yeah, they can find us at PREDA.org on the internet, on Facebook, PREDA Foundation, Facebook. Our information is all there. And of course, they can Google my name. That will bring up the address quite quickly. So we hope that they can contact us, of course, and help us out. No, we can do all the more.
Perfect. Shay, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for the incredible work that you're doing as well.
Thank you so much for having me on, and may you succeed all the more.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was an absolutely incredible conversation. I'm sure you agree. It takes us a deep dive. One thing that stares at me in the face is a quote from Father Shay, where he says, in a world in which we're
religiously affiliated? Do we look to practice what that religion tells us about how society can come together? Or do we choose to get involved in just the rituals, almost like a blackmailing way to get ourselves through whatever we believe is the next incarnation or where our soul goes to? I would imagine if we all were to stand together as fellow human beings and to ask those deeper questions amongst ourselves, that we wouldn't have these issues in the first place. We wouldn't have these paedophile rings. We wouldn't have the violence of the wars or the separation of mankind. It would actually be a collective unity of people coming together to make the world better for all sentient beings. But alas, that is my moment for Wednesday. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I look forward to you traveling with me next week as we continue our 50 Shades of Brown discussions. We're looking at the world and understanding more from the human perspectives. Until then, I hope all remains well. Bye for now.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Well, what an incredible conversation. It is true, isn't it? Because when we have a look at some of the deeper issues being faced by our communities across the globe, whether you are sitting in the UK, in St. Lucia, like last week, or even in India or Pakistan, Nepal, through to the US, we all place a great reliance on the integrity of governments to do what's right. When they say that there's spending cuts that need to come in, well, we take the nod and we agree and we follow, because we believe that they're doing what is best for our communities and for us as a whole. However, looking at this conversation, it also gives us a deeper insight into just the sheer level of negligence that can often take place, and that the burden for that should not be on the masses. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come to the comment section on whichever platform you're listening on and jot it down. I'd love to see what your thoughts on this, and also what other conversations you'd like us to take on. Until next week, as we continue our voyage of 50 Shades of Brown self-discovery, I hope all remains well. Stay well, stay warm, and take care.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.